Welcome to Everyday AI with me, Heidi, where I share inspiration on how you can start to incorporate AI into your everyday life. My goal is to make AI more accessible by sharing simple ways that you can become more familiar with AI use cases, capabilities, and tools. Today, we are going to apply an AI prompt to build a bespoke fitness plan. Sounds like a very simple task, but there's a little bit more to it. So let's get started. So when we're talking about building a fitness plan, we're not talking about any standard fitness plan. I'm not just saying, give me something to go hit the gym 3 days a week. I actually want a very specific output from this prompt, which I'll walk you through in a minute. And what I'm trying to aim for is to train for my first half Ironman race. It is July 2026 right now. So the race itself is in June 2027. So I have conservatively about 10 months to train for my very first 70.3 mile race. So heavy endurance, quite a long duration and runway, and a pretty detailed and complex plan that I'm trying to develop for the next 10 to 12 months. So this is what I want to prompt AI to build for me. And this is what we're going to start with. So before we get into it, I do want to share, what I may have done 18 months ago, right? Or even maybe 10, 12 months ago, which was I would have gone into a Google search and I would have typed in, half Ironman training plans, 12 months or something along those lines, right? And I'm sure everybody's familiar with Google. You'll get a whole list of search results, everything under the sun, right? That has to do with half Ironman training. Influencers who are training for their first websites, athletic, websites, coaching services, specialized apps, various triathlon clubs and teams that you can get involved with, bespoke coaching services, gym services. So lots of discrete resources that are currently available to you on the web. Fast forward that to now, right? Which we're really in the accelerating point of the AI era. We're going to talk about how do we get more out of all of those resources by prompting using an AI engine. So let's build a prompt for an AI engine. I am using Gemini. You've heard me reference Gemini. I think it is my personal AI engine of choice. No specific reason. I just tend to use it the most often. So before we jump into getting into the actual app and typing into the AI engine, I want to give a quick and dirty review of the pillars of creating a prompt, right? For me, there are 5 that I tend to follow every time I'm building a prompt. And I'll walk you through each of those and how that looks when trying to translate it into the fitness plan that I'm trying to create. So the first pillar is creating a persona. The second is to establish context for the engine. The third is to provide the instruction that you want the engine to follow. The fourth is to define any constraints or limitations that the engine needs to account for as it's creating its output. And the fifth is to reiterate and refine upon the output as the engine generates them. So let's walk through each of those steps in a little bit more detail and share how does that look in the context of building this fitness plan. So first thing to do is to create the persona. So what is a persona? Persona, as it relates to prompting for an AI engine, is basically the tone or perspective that you want the AI engine to take. So you could say, take on the persona of my mother and build me a half Ironman training plan. If you want it to sound like your mom. Or more, standard approach would be take on the persona of a strength and endurance coach and build me a half Ironman training plan. But just for fun, let's see what happens when we do plug in mommy as a persona when it comes to building a half Ironman training plan.
Typing in a persona based on my mother to build this half Ironman training plan. And you can see here how that persona comes out with the AI engine. And you can see throughout the plan, it's very much a mothering type of messaging through each of the phases.
So that was fun. You do kind of see, though, how the AI engine will take whatever persona you plug in there, and it will use that as the tone and maybe pull out specific pieces that are more important to the training plan based on the persona that you've defined. But moving forward, I don't want my mother as my persona for this particular training plan. I'm going to go with a strength and endurance coach as my persona of choice for this particular prompt. The second thing we want to do is establish context. So the context is basically the background information that the AI engine can use to further narrow down search results and to refine the output that it's going to generate for you, for whatever prompt you're doing. So in this specific example, my context is I have a strong background in swimming, 20 plus years, and I have a solid basic fitness level. I run about 15 to 20 miles per week, and I do functional strength training 3 to 4 days per week in the gym. I have also done a lot of spin classes off and on over the last 20 years, but I have not cycled extensively outdoors. I've also never done a triathlon where I've put all three of these sports together, and I've never done anything of this distance. So it's my first half Ironman distance race. So this is the context or the background that I'm setting for the AI engine in the prompt. Third pillar is instruction. So this is actually, what do you want the AI engine to give you, right? Is it a plan? Is it a, set of websites that you could look at? What do you want from this engine? So obviously, as we're all aware, I am looking for a plan, but let's be a little bit more specific so we can get the most out of the output from Gemini. So I've been a little bit more specific in a couple areas. So what have I told Gemini for instructions? I've said, I want to do a half Ironman race in 11 months. I've given it a duration. And I want a training plan made up of a foundation block and then blocks that build up to race training. I want the fitness plan to also include meal recommendations for maintaining the right balance of carbs and proteins. I want the plan to help maximize my overall fitness, and I want it to include at least 3 days of strength training with a key focus on lower body strength workouts for injury prevention and building general all-around strength. So this is the instruction set that I'm feeding into Gemini for the output that it gives me. Fourth, I'm going to define constraints. So these are self-explanatory. Any limitations, boundaries, things that the AI engine needs to take into account as it's creating your output. For example, my limitations that I'm plugging in are, I work full-time, right? So I don't have unlimited free time to do super long workouts during the week. I actually have very limited free time during the week. I also have a shoulder injury. I've had surgery on my right shoulder. I don't have an ACL in my left leg. So these are some of the injury constraints and limitations I have. Additionally, I've very specifically stated that longer workouts need to be limited to Saturdays and Sundays. And during the week, I can break workouts into 45-minute to 1-hour increments. So I have done the first 4 pillars. I've created my persona of a strength and endurance coach. I've provided the background context of what I'm trying to do and who I am. and my background, fitness background, relevant to what we're trying to get. I've provided detailed instructions for what I want the engine to generate. And then I've also provided some boundaries and limitations so it doesn't go crazy and give me, 4-hour workouts on a Tuesday and a Thursday, which are not realistic for my lifestyle and schedule. So let's put these all together and see what Gemini brings us.
Here is the persona of a strength and conditioning coach. I've input my context, and then the instruction, and then finally constraints, and let's see what it comes out with. And you can see here the context is outlined along with a high-level macro cycle view and a sample weekly training blueprint to follow, strength training, which I had mentioned in my instructions, as well as a meal plan.
Okay, so we've got a pretty comprehensive first pass of a half Ironman training plan. Now it's time for the final step of the prompting process. And this step, frankly, can go on for as long or as short as you would like. But this is the iterate and refine step. Now, I like to follow a basic rule of thumb that you should never take the first pass of any AI engine output. You should always ask it to further refine, go deeper on an area, ask it a challenging question, anything to make it give you a second or third output at a minimum. I think it's a good practice. Now, also recognizing that this stage, the iterate and refine, it's limitless, right? You could keep asking it questions forever, frankly, and it would probably still give you new outputs each time. So I'm going to ask it to refine a couple specific aspects of my training plan, specifically around getting started. So going a little bit deeper on my first month of training, as well as giving me a little bit more details on the meal prepping side. So let's see what that iteration and refinement looks like.
So here I'm going to add more detail to my program by asking it to expand on the daily workout. So now we've got a full day-to-day breakdown of the activities and the exercises that I should be doing, all the way down to detailed weightlifting activities throughout the week. But actually, it might be easier to put all this in a grid. So I've asked it to refine, added it into a standard grid with a schedule, easier to read. Then finally, I maybe want to do a little bit more with my meals. And so I've got a full meal prep plan with the ingredients for an entire week.
So this is my final output. I like my little simplified grid. It makes it a little bit easier to follow, and I can take that, plug it into my workout apps and follow for easy tracking. I also really like the additional insight on meals and meal prepping for the first 7 days. Gives some good information around, how to create a balanced diet. You could, if you wanted, move it to the natural next step, which would be, hey, create a grocery list based on these meal prep ideas. I stopped where we stopped because, again, you get the gist of how this works, but you can keep going pretty endlessly with the refining and iterative prompting once you start to get the hang of it. So there you have it. We have just used AI to build a bespoke, detailed fitness plan to embark on a first half Ironman distance race. And this plan was built based on my personal, parameters, including my work schedule, injury limitations, all of the various factors that I've plugged in, and it's given me a pretty comprehensive view. So, using Gemini or any AI engine is actually really straightforward. Once you get into it and open up the app and start to play around with it, it becomes really simple. Hopefully, running through this real life example has done two things. One, hopefully it's given you some inspiration on something that you could plug in and use for your own life. And two, hopefully it's also given you some of the foundations of how to use it most effectively with kind of this 5-step prompting process. So I would love to hear comments on how you've gotten on, if you've used this and created your own fitness plan or used it for inspiration on something else. Please hit subscribe if you enjoyed this video and want to see more content on everyday AI.